Hey guys, what's up? Today I want to show you 10 JRPG sequels you probably didn't know about, and yeah, all of them, believe it or not, were released in North America. Are they any good? Well, we're gonna have to find out, so let's begin! Number 10. Maryskelter Nightmares. You probably didn't even know this game existed in the first place. It's more of a hidden gem on the PS Vita, developed by Compile Hard and Idea Factory. It's a dungeon crawler in first-person, turn-based RPG with some twisted and dark themes. It follows the story of Jack and Alice, two imprisoned kids living in a post-apocalyptic world. One day they get rescued by an organization trying to fight the horrible creatures that destroy humanity. While the premise is solid and the story itself is quite interesting, it's a Compile Hard game, which means lollies, sexualized magical girls, and the usual harem. Well, believe it or not, it has a direct sequel. It's simply called Maryskelter 2. It takes place after the events of the first game, with a whole new cast of characters, but also several cameos from the ones in the previous title. In fact, all of the Blood Maidens from the organization come back, but the goal is to rescue Jack and Alice, who now fell victims to a powerful nightmare. Jack, however, gets turned into some creepy-ass monster that can only communicate with the main heroine here. So you can already tell what the main quest of this sequel is about. Gameplay-wise, it's more of the same, traversing large and cryptic dungeons in first person, getting into turn-based battles with enemies, sexy transformations when the girls have too much blood, etc. It baffles me that a game like this had a direct sequel, considering it's somewhat obscure. To make matters even more surprising is that the first one remained on the PS Vita, while the sequel was released on almost all modern systems, and it includes the original. Cool, huh? Number 9. Popolo Roy. This little gem on the PSP is not just one game, it's a whole media franchise with anime series and several RPGs. First, there was a trilogy on the PS1, only in Japan, that they ported as one game on the PSP. We did get that one, thankfully. Then it went on the PS2 with even more sequels, all of them staying in Japan. The one sequel we did get was on the 3DS, now called Return to Popolo Roy. It was developed by the usual company, Epix, but now with Marvelous involved, so they turned this sequel into some strange mixture of Harvest Moon, now called Story of Seasons, hence the subtitle of this game, A Story of Seasons Fairy Tale. So instead of just playing like the classic games on the PS1, PSP and PS2, it also involves a farming simulation. In the end, it's pretty much Popolo Roy meets Harvest Moon. Thing is though, it is a direct sequel to those other games. It is Prince Pietro's 13th birthday. However, that very same day, the soil has been infested by dark beings, resulting in fallow fields and shortage of crops throughout the kingdom. So it's Pietro's job, alongside his companions, to stop all of this, but right after ending up trapped in another kingdom. The game's fun, and it easily holds up to its predecessor, and it plays very much the same with the same battle mechanics. It still plays like a traditional RPG, so don't get too discouraged if you're not into the Harvest Moon games. Just remember, part of the gameplay does revolve around its farming simulation. Number 8. Luffy and the Fortress of Doom. No, I'm not talking about Luffy 2, and in case you didn't know, that game is actually a prequel. The first game in the series, originally released on the Super Nintendo, does have its own sequel. It's called Luffy The Legend Returns, released now on the Game Boy Color. It takes place 100 years after its events, so it's not 100% a direct sequel. However, it does carry over several plots and story aspects of it. Main character is now Wayne, a descendant of Maxim himself, protagonist of Luffy 2. Sinistrals have reawakened, so our new two heroes, Wayne and Sina, must gather strong fighters to stop them all once again. Lufia 3's new main feature that distinguishes from its predecessors is the battle system. As you can see, it places characters on a menu, each with their own sub-menu, so you can choose their actions. The fun thing is that now you can have up to 9 characters during battle and they're all active. However, they can only be controlled per column on each formation. Remember Suikoden 3? Well, it's somewhat similar to that. Overall, it's a fun game, but it can get tedious and repetitive sometimes. Number 7. White Knight Chronicles. Yes, that PS3 exclusive that was both an MMORPG and a traditional JRPG has a sequel. And in fact, the sequel includes a free digital remaster of the first game. And in fact, it's also an exclusive to the PlayStation 3. Direct sequel, yes sir, some new characters here and there, but most of the main cast are the protagonists once again. If you want to, you can create a whole new character for yourself, or you can just carry over the one you created for the first game. After the events of it, a new civil war is taking place in the kingdom of Faria. A mysterious general attempts to get Faria's princess out of the capital since they're both being pursued. So Princess Cisna summons the 3 main characters from the first game to go to Faria. They have a different mission, alright, but fate leads them to the Princess of Faria and the general, so they end up being involved. One thing eventually leads to another and so on until it's all about saving the world again. Gameplay is exactly the same, almost identical to the first game. Level 5 didn't really improve anything substantial, which is why the game flopped in sales and eventually killed the franchise. Personally, I don't think it's a bad game. In fact, it's far from it. It's pretty good. It's still just as good as the original, with its real-time battle mechanics. You can move your character around, but he or she will attack by themselves, so you can select the actions they'll execute next. It's quite similar to the systems in Final Fantasy XII and Xenoblade Chronicles. I really enjoy this sequel, and I do recommend that if you like the original. Just don't expect it to be different or superior in any sense. Think of it as a game cut into 2 parts and you're merely playing part 2. Simple as that. Number 6. Phantasy Star Universe. This one has a heavily overlooked sequel with a physical release on the PS2 and a digital one on the 360. It's called Ambition of the Illuminus. Actually, and I've said this before in other videos, Universe is a whole saga of 5 games. We only got the first 4 though, the last 3 being on the PSP, now known as Phantasy Star Portable. But they have the same universe, planets, conflicts, interface, carrying over characters from the previous games. Ambition of the Illuminus puts the player in the shoes of their own customizable character. You join the Guardians in order to fight against the Seed, the same abominable alien race you fight in the first game. The big twist here is that Ethan Weber, the main character from Universe 1, apparently has gone rogue and it's messing up with the Guardians and the government. Your instructor, Laia Martinez, has been trying to track him down for a while, so the whole game will revolve around the continuous fight against the Seed and the investigation on Ethan. All of this while the plot keeps thickening. It's a really solid story, and when I first played it, I was surprised on how good it was handled as a sequel. The gameplay is identical, perhaps merely with improved interface and controls, to Universe 1. Still an action RPG where you'll traverse large areas and dungeons with your party. You can switch between several weapons during battle, but you can only control your character. The rest will always be handled by the computer. This game is criminally overlooked, like I said at the beginning. It was completely ignored because the first game wasn't a big commercial success, and also because people thought it was merely an online game. And it's not! Number 5. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner. Yep, it's that guy you've seen in other SMT games. The guy who looks like a police officer from the 1920s and summons demons to fight by his side. You probably already knew this, but he has his own games on the PS2. That's right, I said games, in plural. Raido Kusunoha vs King Abaddon is a direct sequel only Shin Megami Tensei fans know about. It was a little bit overlooked because both games were now action RPGs, unlike every other SMT title, which are turn-based. Some fans didn't like the change, but who cares, right? They are spin-offs and they were still great to play. So this sequel follows the life of Raido Kusunoha, a private detective working for a private agency. He's handling a new big case now during the 1930s after being summoned again by the Yatagarasu in order to protect Japan. From what? Well, from demons, naturally. The same demons he can recruit to fight by his side. These demons are usually controlled by the computer, but you can manipulate their behavior and strategize with their elemental strengths or weaknesses. Only 2 can be summoned per battle, while you control Raidu with his sword or his gun with only a few combos. In other words, the gameplay is almost identical to its predecessor. I know I've said that for a lot of games in today's video, but they are direct sequels. So once again, you're playing one game cut into 2 parts, with this forgotten sequel being part 2. And yes, it's just as good as the first one. Number 4. Shining Force. I know you'll think of Shining Force 2 as the sequel to this one, but nope! The very first Shining Force on the Genesis had not only 1, but 2 direct sequels. They're known as Shining Force Gaiden. The release history is kinda weird though, so check this out. Gaiden was released only in Japan for the Game Gear, but Gaiden 2, also on the same system, was localized. It was retitled as Shining Force: The Sword of Hagia. This only confused fans because the true first direct sequel to the original game was gone, as if one important episode of the trilogy was missing. Not sure if it was a good or bad decision from Sega, I'll leave that to you, but they decided to remaster both Gaiden episodes and release them on the Sega CD. That version was localized, thankfully. So, Shining Force Gaiden takes place 20 years after the first game. You literally now play with the children of the main characters of it. The nation of Guardiana is still at the center of it all. Cypress, an enemy kingdom, kidnaps several soldiers and puts Queen Henri under a powerful sleep spell. So the new offspring will be tasked on rescuing everybody by going to Cypress. The sequel to it, The Sword of Hagia, merely continues these events, now with an even darker plot. Gameplay in these 2 sequels are basically the same as in the first Shining Force. Grid-based tactical battles will take place on either inside dungeons or on the overworld map. Improved controls and interface being faster are amongst the only changes, so if you love the first Shining Force like I did, you'll have a blast with these 2 sequels, as they play just as good. Emulation will be your best friend if you can't get your hands on the Game Gear or Sega CD versions. Number 3. Blue Dragon. Remember that game on the 360 developed by Hironobu Sakaguchi after he left Square Enix? It's true, man, it has not only 1 but 2 direct sequels on the Nintendo DS, just like Shining Force. Each entry being completely different though from each other in terms of gameplay. Yes, all developed by Sakaguchi's studio Mistwalker. Being very different is probably what made them obscure and therefore overlooked. Blue Dragon Plus follows the events of the first game with the same charismatic cast of characters, alright. 1 year after Blue Dragon 1, Zola finds a new threat to the world. When she encounters an evil monster, this creature goes into the Cube Worlds, and that's where the entire chase will take place in. As you can see, it looks and plays vastly different from a traditional turn-based RPG. It's now a real-time strategy system where you select the destinations of your characters. They will slowly move on their own until reaching an enemy to attack. You can manipulate certain actions, of course, but it's a real-time gameplay, so characters will mostly act on their own. This sequel is not that good, the system wasn't very well implemented, and because it's extremely cryptic, you'll get lost in the cubes over and over again with a lot of useless backtracking. Not a bad game, but far from being great. The third game in the trilogy, Blue Dragon Awakened Shadow, though, that became now an action RPG. And it's far better than Plus in my opinion. Not much to say about it, as it is a simple hack and slash with Shu and company, but you create your own character whom you'll control during the whole journey. After the events of Plus, it turns out every single human being has a shadow. Characters from Nennis Raid seem to be involved, so it's up to you and the cast of Blue Dragon to find out what the hell is going on. Honestly, these 2 sequels feel more like spin-offs more than anything, as they do continue the story, but in a very small and unsubstantial way. They do explain a lot of stuff left uncovered in the original game though, so just because of that, they might be worth checking out. Number 2, Disgaea, the first one. I bet you didn't know there was a direct sequel to the first Disgaea game, and this one is exclusive to the PS3. It's called Disgaea D2: A Brighter Darkness. Basically, it continues the story of Laharl, Etna, and Floan after the events of the first game. I don't want to spoil that one for anybody, so let's just say the story here involves an uprising from several unhappy demons, poisonous flowers changing the netherworld weather, and Laharl being turned to a woman! Yeah! The gameplay is basically the same as in its predecessors, most specifically Disgaea 1 and 2. Here though, some new features were added to spice up the battle mechanics. For example, characters can mount monsters, but these obviously take damage each turn. There's a bond system too, believe it or not, but only works during battle. Characters will fight more efficiently if near their favorite allies. It also influences how efficient their monster mounting will be. Other neat features include the cheat shop and the Devil Dojo, which serves to alter the character stats for your convenience. This in a Disgaea game is awesome, I have to admit. Overall, it's a pretty fun game, but you really need to love the series to fully enjoy it. Number 1, Final Fantasy XII. It isn't that hard to believe that there might be a sequel based on a Final Fantasy game. 12 had one on the Nintendo DS called Revenant Wings. Finally, a game where Vaan is a true main character and he's actually important to the plot. Not that I care though, as I still think he's a lame protagonist. But anyway, he now has his own airship alongside his friend Penelo as they go treasure hunting around the world. 1 year after the events of the original game, Vaan reunites with Balthier and Fran to go together to obtain a new treasure. Right after finding it, the ruin collapses and Vaan loses his ship, but somehow he ends up sneaking aboard a new one. So he takes over it, but in the process ends up in a mysterious land. So Vaan and company end up getting dragged into a war between Sky pirates and a mystical race called the Aegil. The gameplay of this game is very similar to Blue Dragon Plus. It's a real-time strategy RPG, but it plays entirely with the damn stylus! As usual, you can't directly control your characters, only tell them where to go or what to fight. There's also a triangle system with melee, ranged and flying units, one being weak to the other and so on. But it's slow-paced, boring, highly unbalanced, so it's a bit of an acquired taste. Yeah, one I never acquired. Not a bad game, but I believe it got positive reviews, so check it out if you really like Vaan. Oh, and real-time strategy RPGs. Believe it or not, there are more JRPG sequels, but most of them stayed in Japan, so I guess that makes up for the next video, huh? 10 JRPG sequels that stayed in Japan. Only in Japan! Thank you very much for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!